Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Wargo. I'm Senior Director of Market Intelligence from AVIXA. I wanted to share some insights from our ongoing research about the post-pandemic world, the impacts to markets like education, and the opportunities for Pro AV. Education, like many of the markets that we've been watching, has been massively disrupted by the pandemic. And yet, as we look back in time, we'll see some things that were very consistent with the pre-pandemic period. And that there were things in place that allowed us to actually adapt more readily. So if we can show the slides. So as you note from the picture here, this was actually a photo of higher ed taken prior to the pandemic. And look, if you will, at how people in this space interacting with each other, while not masked as of yet, were already social distancing. They had spread themselves out. They were aggregating around technology in a way to collaborate and learn in a new environment, in this case, the idea garden in a higher ed setting. So fortunately, for Pro AV, while other markets were shutting down, education had to spend quickly to keep business going. And then we see that in our forecasts. There's a little bit of an eye candy type of chart, but what you can tell from this, if you look on the x-axis here, you're seeing the 2020 growth and decline of the market, and then the 2021 recovery on that y-axis. If you look at education on the far, far right, we'll see that it was one of the less hit markets for Pro AV. What this meant was we saw the market really investing in the new technology to allow business to continue on. And so we were talking about, at the time of the forecasts, a pulling forward of the investment. And you'll really see that in our forecasts year to year for how education fared during the pandemic and post. What's interesting, though, is this forecast, when we did it right around the June timeframe of 2020, we were really showing that, yes, there was some investment in 2020 and, of course, some growth in 2021. So about $22 billion in 2020, growing a little bit in 2021. And then you'll see it's slow and steady as we go from there, an average growth of about 4 to 5% as you look from year to year. I would say that there's some significant upside to this. While we know there was initial investments that had to be made in order for education to continue, we do think that there's now a chance for a reinvestment. We've heard that from some of the previous speakers today, where we made those investments originally to just keep things going, to make things work, et cetera. And now there's chance for improvement. So we look at education as one of those that could very well exceed expectations for Pro AV as we go forward. Now, it's certainly true that the impact and the rate of recovery is very different as we look at various parts of the world. So if we focus on Americas at the first, we see about a minus 3% decline from 2019 to 2020 in terms of Pro AV revenue spent in this space, with about a 4% growth in 2021. APAC, a little less hit. We know that that was a region where the pandemic hit first, recovery happened faster, and certainly as we look at 2021, we're seeing a robust amount of investment in Pro AV technology in higher ed and education, generally speaking. EMEA, a little harder hit in 2020 and a little less growth as we go into 21. There's a lot of intrinsic market dynamics that are going on in the EMEA markets that make it a different animal, whether that's Brexit or microeconomics. What I would say is country level data will look very different, and the rates of investment in higher education, AV technologies will look different as we go forward. But no matter what, regardless of what the regional differences are, the nature of the investment across the globe really reflects an emphasis on back-end technology. So once again, a little bit of an eye candy chart in terms of how the investments are structured. So what you're looking at now is we look at 2020 investments in Pro AV technology and the proportions that go to various sectors of technology. You'll see in the very left-hand corner here, video projection. Education remains a strong market for video projection, and we do see investments in that in 2020. About 24% of the Pro AV spending was on projection. But the next largest segment here is streaming media, storage, and distribution. What we're talking about here is back-end technologies to allow content to be captured and distributed out, whether it's in hybrid learning modes, synchronous learning modes, et cetera. So this is the story that we're hearing about at RISE this year, is that investment in those back-end technologies to allow us to be remote. Then beyond that, of course, you get some other technologies in the mix, and this will change as we go forward. I invite you to join me in a little bit for a water cooler session around where we can talk about this, a virtual meetup. So join us online in about 20 minutes or so. We'd be happy to discuss this a little bit more with you. Thanks for joining us today, and have a great 21.